Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. I feel for many of us, we may not originally find the realm of psychedelic medicines consciously for healing, yet I do feel all of us move towards this realm out of curiosity surrounding what is possible for us in our lives with regards to healing, expansion, etc. Today's guest on the show is a man who has gone through his fair share of challenges pertaining to life itself, and with the help of psychedelic medicines, has been able to beat past addictions and truly rise to the occasion to become the best version of himself. In this episode, we discuss him finding psychedelic medicines and the amount they assisted him in successfully navigating addiction, including microdosing LSD to mitigate alcohol addiction, finding Kambo that, although not a psychedelic, also helped him rid his body of much of the toxic load he had taken on, and also how his remineralization protocol has been paramount in allowing these changes to hold steadfast in his life. So make sure to tune into this wild ride as I welcome my man Matt Kaufman to the show. Matthew Kaufman, my man, it is so amazing to have you here with me today, brother. And we were just chatting before we hit record about so many of the subjects we're going to dive in, man. Kambo, mineralization, microdosing LSD. But where I'd really love to start this off, man, is how you first got introduced to psychedelic medicines, right? I know a little bit of your background, beating alcohol addiction and these kind of things, but tell me how you first found psychedelics. And then if you want to go into a little bit of maybe how your relationship with these plants has changed over the years, depending on where you got into them, you can definitely dive into that too. But tell us exactly how you first got introduced to these medicines.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I have a funny first story, really, I guess I'll tell, and then we'll go into more of my addiction background. But honestly, the first time I ever used any psychedelic, I kind of was more just a drinker. Every once in a while, I might pop a pill or something at a party, but like mostly just drank. And we were drinking all day at a cabin up north in Michigan. We used to go up there every year to our friend's cabin. There'd be like 20 of us, and we just party all weekend, have fun. And my buddy gave everybody some mushrooms one time, and I freaked the fuck out. Like I literally was like, I want it to go away. Like I was having a tough time. Like it must have been bringing up some challenging situations. I also started to get the visual effects I really didn't like. It probably didn't help that I'd been drinking on the beach at like 10 in the morning. So there was like this long, like no set and setting, just completely random. He didn't realize the mushrooms were a little bit stronger than he originally thought. He thought he gave everyone kind of like something that would just, get you in a little happy mood. And me, never taken them before, just was like, okay. And then everyone was kind of like more fucked up than they actually intended on. And everyone was kind of, a couple people were hiding under blankets. So that was that. And then I kind of just never tried it again. I was like, fuck that. After I came down, I actually laughed until like 6 a.m. Like it was great once I came down, but I had a tough like initial period. So I kind of turned me off. But really, I guess I'll circle back around to in my 20s, kind of like you, the cannabis was booming. I already drank a lot in college. I had no father growing up. So, I had some traumas. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. I seen just a lot of just ruggedness in general, just growing up in that kind of environment. So, after college, I started growing cannabis and, I started smoking cannabis. I really didn't smoke in college until like that last semester. It was kind of legal. Some of my friends were growing. I was mostly just a drinker. And then, like I said, occasional like pharmaceutical or something here and there at a party, but mostly just drank. And then I started smoking cannabis and growing cannabis. And with that freedom for the first time, like not being in school, not being in anything, is where the addictions really started to run rampant because I was my own boss. I could go take care of my plants in the morning. I could go at night. I could go in the afternoon. Like I basically didn't have anyone to answer to. And so from there, I started taking a lot of Vicodin. I was taking Adderall. I was smoking. I was just, taking Molly at festivals and parties. So I started to get a little out of control for like a good 5-6 year period. looking back at what we know now with what we'll get into with the mineralization is I think I had a lot of heavy metals, and what these pharmaceuticals and things were doing were not only masking the traumatic experiences from growing up without a father and seeing a lot of crazy stuff in Flint's environment, but also masking the neuroinflammation that I had from all of the chronic infections and all the heavy metals that I had in my system. Not even knowing that most of the cannabis I was smoking was probably even adding to the heavy metal toxicity in general, the cadmium that we know is in cannabis now. So a lot of things that we didn't know at the time. And then drinking, just clogging up the liver. So you're not even being able to detoxify in general. So I started to feel really, really off after I partied really hard, for 6 or 7 years. I mean, just whenever I wanted, just drinking all the time, just had a lot of fun. I loved it. I traveled around, I was partying, I was popping bottles in Vegas, and I was fucking at the Super Bowl high and drunk by myself. And I mean, just doing crazy outlandish shit that, it was kind of like a dream come true from a kid from Flint. Everyone's broke, poor. I'm growing cannabis and flying all around, fucking just partying wherever I wanted to. So I was having a really good time until I crashed and burned. And so a friend of mine, even though I had a college degree and, I was always kind of intellectual, read books here and there, So a buddy of mine put me onto Tim Ferriss's podcast, mostly because he was he's really business minded and things like that. Well, little did I know, coming across Tim Ferriss's podcast, that I would start listening to a podcast about psychedelics. And I'm like, well, I really only had this one experience where I kind of freaked out. And then I started thinking about it more. I'm like, well, I had an amazing experience after I freaked out. So first off, I started doing meditation, and then I started microdosing, and then listening to some of the podcasts around how LSD was used for alcoholism. And I'm thinking, shit, man, so I take a big dose of LSD, have an amazing day. It was probably 150 micrograms. Amazing day, shattering day. I laughed. I was with two friends. We just sat inside of my house pretty much and just laughed and cracked jokes all day and had an amazing time. And so then after that, I tried 1.5 grams of mushrooms, which isn't crazy, but I was just oh, let's see where this goes. And had another laughing, kind of felt good. So from there, I just started dabbling with microdoses, and I really believe they were the catalyst to getting me off the alcohol. And then from there, the cannabis industry was kind of getting, as just big money was coming in Michigan. We were kind of getting weeded out. You used to get $300 an ounce. Now you're getting $100 an ounce, but you're doing the same amount of work. And it was just getting a little stressful for me. And so I thought that, whatever, I'm going to move to Florida. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to figure it out and just completely start from scratch. I don't know what I'm going to do, but, I sold my house, sold all my equipment, and just moved down. And then when I got down here, I just figured, I'd quit smoking, I'd quit drinking, after a few months, I'd get all these drugs out of my system and I'd be okay. Once I got sober and I didn't have the crutches, I realized my brain was fried. This was beyond just a 90-day, get sober and you'll feel good. I was fucked up. I had fatigue. I just couldn't really remember things. And so I really had to go through this whole process of healing at a deep level. And I've seen Lyme doctors and different functional doctors. I mean, I've probably spent 80 to 100 grand over the last 5-6 years, just seeing doctors, buying biohacks, spending $1,000 a month on supplements, all which kind of led me here. That's what led me to Kambo. That's what led me to the psychedelic ceremonies, thinking that some of it was emotional. And then now my main focus has been the mineralization piece.
Dude, that is wild, Matt. And, it really reminds me a lot of for instance, I never fully got into partying super hard, but when I was in college, I commuted to college. And so I would always go down to Providence because it was 18 plus clubs down there. And we'd get, pretty shit faced on the weekends and things like that. Luckily, alcohol and I never really got along. Shit face for me was 4 drinks, and that was oh man, I have a headache now, so I got to stop, and cannabis, was always something that, I always felt better when I was connecting with it. But it took me years to get into my first other psychedelic, and when I did, very similar to you, my first mushroom experience sounded more like your second one, right? gram and a half, sat up all night at my friend's house just laughing, eating a lot of Oreos too. That's why to this day, not that I would anymore, but I would never eat Oreos again because last time this happened, I was 23. and I ate 4 entire sleeves of Oreos. You want to talk about stomach aches, man? Woo, especially after doing psilocybin too, because that messes with your stomach as well due to the chitin. That was definitely an interesting experience. But after that, things really started shifting for me. And, it's really cool to be able to, see the through lines between our stories and see how, these medicines really kickstarted something really big. And something that you mentioned that, I'm really excited to dive into. And for everyone listening, we've had Jason on before and also Hamid Jabbar talking about mineralization, but they've talked more about the theory of it and more about what it does and things like that. Whereas we really haven't had someone on that's talked about the results of that, And so if you could share a little bit about, go through the process for anyone who hasn't, maybe heard those episodes of getting the HTMA test, getting supplements, etc. But share a lot of what that has done for you and what it's opened up for you in that remineralization protocol plan that you've been on. Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that, as some of your guests have already spoken about, I think that we do run to some of these psychedelic medicines to kind of mask. It's another Band-Aid. It's similar to what I think biohackers are doing sometimes, what I think people are doing when they're taking high dose vitamin C or they're doing high doses of nutrients and B vitamins without really having a test involved. I think they're all Band-Aids, and we're feeling a little bit better. We're not using pharmaceuticals. We're using something that's a little bit more natural, has less side effects, but really without a test and being able to see exactly where we're at. I do think we're running a lot of it's almost the same as Western medicine, but with less side effects. We're just kind of putting a Band-Aid over things. So once I got the HTMA test and kind of really got involved, I could see that I was really in a burnout kind of state, adrenals, thyroid, all the things, these really well-versed practitioners, they can tell you these based on your ratios from the test. And so my wife's doing it as well. She loves it. I'm super happy because we're about to start trying to have kids. So now I think that the baby will be a lot healthier as well. What they do is they give you this basically program that's tailored to you and your ratios. And it's very, very complex. I just started the practitioner training course. I'm only in the first couple of books. I haven't started reading charts or anything yet, but I do think that you could probably start taking a couple clients in maybe 6 months. But I do think to probably be an expert at it, it might take 2 to 3 years. It's really complex. It's not like looking at the graph and saying, oh, your person has low magnesium, let's give them more magnesium. Or say your calcium's high, we're not going to give you calcium. It's really not that. It's a lot different if you have a really good mineral balancing practitioner. But what I've experienced is I'm about 6 months in. I should have new results like today. I've been doing them a lot quicker than they recommend. I think that that's been crucial for me. They'll say 3 to 4 months, but I've noticed that my ratios have shifted pretty dramatically in a 2-month period. So that's the other thing people don't know. What you're feeling good on, if you stay on that long term and your ratios have shifted, you're now on the wrong protocol for your own self. So it was the right protocol in the beginning, but now that you've waited 3 to 4 months, it may be the wrong protocol. So you'll start to feel better, but then you'll start to feel worse because now you're causing imbalances in other places. So that's why the retests are critical. I really wouldn't wait longer than 3 months. I think in the first year, you could probably even benefit from doing it every 2. And then as you balance out more over time, then you can probably wait the 3-4 months because less dramatic shifts are going to happen. But in the beginning, I'll say I really got a boost in energy. I was cool. I was in the gym. I was all right, I feel pretty good. But as you talk to some of these practitioners and you realize once the body gets a little bit of that energy, right, in the right ratios, you get a little bit of adrenal support, you're getting some thyroid support, you're getting the right minerals in, then the body goes, oh shit, let's dump these metals. Because now it has enough energy to actually process the metals And then sometimes it's not just toxic metals, it can be toxic forms of minerals that your body stored as well, which people don't realize. They become these like bio unavailable forms, such as copper, manganese is one, iron is one. These things can build up in the tissues if your body's not balanced and it doesn't really know how to utilize everything correctly. So I had a really tough, probably month 3, 4, and 5, where I was eliminating a lot of parasites, which is funny because you're not attacking the parasites. There's like this whole group of people who are really into like doing herbal parasite cleanse. And I think that can be detrimental because if you kill off parasites with herbal tinctures or protocols, well, what they're feeding on usually is heavy metals. So if they're feeding on the heavy metals somewhere and then you kill the parasites, well, where do the metals go? They potentially could replace somewhere else that's actually worse, like your brain. It could have been in your kidney, but then now it's in your brain because you released the metal as you killed the parasite. So for me, I think the best way to do it is to remineralize. That's going to allow your body to release the metals when it sees fit instead of using something like chelation or some kind of zeolite, which I actually do like a good zeolite on my protocol. Most practitioners wouldn't recommend that, but I do use one. Basically, as you do the mineral balancing, you are going to allow the body to kind of release things as it wants to in the order that it wants to. And then the parasites will just go as the terrain gets better. And you're going to notice a lot of, I had constipation, I had diarrhea, I had brain fog, fatigue. I mean, I was sleeping one period like 9 hours a night and taking naps in the day. Like I had to create space in my schedule because I was like, I'm going to get tired around, 1 o'clock. And so I'm going to pass out for 30 minutes or an hour. And New Calm was really big in that. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I love New Calm. For anybody, you ever heard of that?
I've heard about it, but I don't think I've tried it. Is that the magnesium one?
No, so the New Calm is a biohacking device that allows you to simulate like 2 to 5 hours of deep sleep in a 20 to 40 minute nap. So for me, who was really needing the rest, I had already had the New Calm before I started the protocol, but that was critical in me getting even more rest on the protocol because you're not going to want to exercise vigorously or work harder. Your body wants the rest, and it'll even cause states of depression. And what I've been learning is the depression is on purpose because the body knows that you won't slow down yourself. You're not smart enough to slow down. We always have something else we want to chase, some dream we want to catch, something that we want to accomplish, right? That's when we feel productive and we feel good about ourselves. Well, that's not what's needed when the body's releasing heavy metals and different toxins. So they'll cause a state of depression, which is kind of hard to get through. But what that does is that slows you down. Because when you're in like a funk, like a cloud of depression, what do? You just pop on Netflix, pop on a documentary, you kind of lounge around. You don't really have the energy to go do things, but that's actually on purpose. And so there's definitely ups and downs. And then after that about 3-month period of really feeling off and eliminating a lot of parasites, and there was a lot of mercury and different metals coming out on my test, I've kind of in the past like 3 weeks kind of hit like a swing back up of energy where I'm not napping. I'm having more, I'm able to go through this course, read these books, able to do my podcast a little bit better. So I don't think that it's going to be linear. I think it goes up, then it goes down a little, then it goes up. But what it is, gradually, those heavy metal dumps will start to be less and less severe because your body has more energy to kind of handle everything as it removes out. So the beginning ones are definitely going to be the worst. Some people can take 2-3 years to really balance out. You can speed that up with different things like using infrared sauna, using grounding mats, using PEMF mats, ozone, all the things that biohackers do. But, it's been a whirlwind of just like ups and downs and lots of depression. But, I've been to all them doctors. I've done $20,000 Lyme treatment with Dr. Minkoff, who's amazing, which I do think it probably eradicated the Lyme. I've done 1 million Kambo ceremonies and 1 million psychedelic ceremonies, but nothing has really moved the needle like the minerals.
Yeah, 100%. I've found a very similar thing, and I'll definitely ask you some follow-up questions in a second. But first, like what I wanted to dive into was the idea of like, for me, I know on my tests, the first test I got done, I had quite a bit of lead for sure that was dumping. And then I went on the protocol. I had a lot of energy at first, for sure. And, this is actually like in this moment, me really understanding like, oh yeah, like this is going to be something that happens. This last test I got done, I just got the results last week. I'd been on for about 3 months now. I did the first test and Jason told me the second test is actually a much better idea of where you're really at, because like the first test, you haven't started the mineralization. So a lot's going to be locked up. The second test, my adrenals showed like, yeah, dude, you're in the red. Like you got to calm the fuck down. And it was interesting because, I've realized that if you think about minerals in regards to trauma, in regards to programs and patterns, in regards to, just like your mindset and all of these things, right, to make it more tangible, one thing I've realized is like, oh shit, like I built a lifestyle around like a traumatized version of myself, right, that wanted to do so much every day that it wasn't sustainable, right? And that's why like, I'd been realizing over the past couple of months, like, man, why do I feel like I really need a morning coffee now? Like I had never been someone who, the last 10 years that had drank coffee or whatnot. But I started realizing like my typical tricks just aren't working. And that got pretty frightening, because when you're showing up to like 12 hours of calls every day, like it definitely made me realize like, okay, I get to now like redo how my schedule looks, because now I'm starting to understand a deeper aspect of who I really am and what my real energy levels are and what they are right now, and I've definitely felt the depression as well. And it's been really challenging to keep your head above water with that. One thing that I started today, because Jason recommended, no caffeine, which I'm like, okay. And I didn't really do a lot, to be honest. I did one double shot of espresso in the morning, but I cut that out. But he also wanted me to cut out like, any kratom I use, which like kratom is like my secret weapon when it comes to like talking for 12 hours straight. Right. So again, never did a lot of it, right? A gram, maybe 2 grams in a day, like nothing crazy. I was always very aware that I didn't want to reach adrenal fatigue, but it's allowed me to recognize like my true energy levels. And it's allowed me to recognize some things that I can get on that can help that aren't going to upregulate my nervous system. So today, actually, I tried methylene blue for the first time. And that shit's fucking awesome. Really enjoy methylene blue.
Your first time?
Yeah, first time. Well, technically I had tried it once before. The only reason I know is because my pee was blue, but I don't know what it was. When I interviewed Mr. Newts from Newtopia, he sent me like a huge box, and then he sent me like a bag. And the bag was all of these like testers that he's working on. So there was one that had like no instructions, no name, nothing. It was just these little vials with 2 capsules in them. So one day I told Rachel, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I told Rachel, I'm like, hey, you want to try this out one day? So we tried it out. This has got like a year ago. And it was very interesting. It honestly felt like psilocybin, like straight up. But the only reason I know methylene blue was in it was because I started peeing blue after. And that freaked me out for like a hot moment before I realized what was going on. But yeah, that was like, I don't know what it was mixed with, but that was like not what I would recommend anyone do to like be focused and attentive. But this is just pure methylene blue. And it's amazing. And so I've been stacking it with like, herbs like bacopa, different tea blends, adaptogenic herbs. And that's been like a really nice way to work through that. But, it's really interesting because, you speak about a lot of different things that I imagine people are dealing with that are listening to this show. And one of the biggest things too that you touched on is the idea that like you had done millions of Kambo ceremonies, millions of psychedelic ceremonies, right? But nothing really like held that change until you started attacking the minerals, right? And going for that. And that's like exactly what Hamid and Jason talk about. And as I found as well, like, I really think that one of the biggest challenges is exactly what you stated, right? That people are seeking psychedelics out for the right reasons. They want something different, right? They're realizing that something in their life is off. They're out of alignment. They need a change. So they're finding these medicines in good intentions, right? Like, hey, I want something different. But then what's happening is when they go through these ceremonies, they're experiencing this something different. And hopefully they enjoy that something different, right? Whether it's like a challenging experience that afterwards they feel like a great resolution on or something like that. But after that, they then feel like shit because they just tanked even more of their minerals and they're completely unaware of this, right? So then the only thought in their head is like, God, I feel like shit. I must need another ceremony. Like, because I just want to feel that again. Like, that's where I felt fully alive. And so now what they've done is they've mistaken the psychedelic as the moon rather than the finger that points you back at the moon when you get disoriented, right? And so this is a lot of what's happening. And I think that it's so important to have these conversations around minerals and the other things we're going to talk about today too, because I think that for a lot of people, they might hear it the first time and they'll be like, oh, whatever, right? But when they actually hear some of like the tangible things that one can experience when they're facing mineral depletion or also what they're going through when they're starting to remediate their mineral status, right? Like those things are really important, even for me, right? Like I just realized, like, oh yeah, I have been feeling a lot of that. And there's been part of me that's been judgmental of myself for that because I'm very like a go, go, go type person. I'm an Aries. I like being on fire. Like that's like where I feel most alive. And I've luckily, like my whole life, I've found ways to do it pretty naturally, like to stay at that level. I've never gotten into pharmaceuticals or anything like that. Alcohol and I never really got along. So I lucked out in that respect. Nicotine is maybe the only thing that, is a little bit harder to quit than I would like it to be. But, when it comes to all of this stuff, I think it's super important because at the end of the day, like if we don't talk about this, how are other people going to know about it? And you figure like, dude, here are me and you talking about this, right? I run a business called Highly Optimized, right? You're clearly highly optimized yourself. You've done all the things. And we're just starting to become aware of like really how powerful this is. Think about like the average person who like, maybe is in their 40s, just found out about mushrooms through someone, maybe their therapist or whatever. They go do them. They feel this huge high, but then afterwards they feel this depletion. They have no idea what's going on. So then they start ramping up the caffeine. They start trying more mushrooms. Like, and again, it's not that those things are bad. It's just that, we want people to be able to hold these things so their entire life gets better. Right. And so, really interesting you speak about these things because they resonate a lot with me.
Yeah. And to correlate it back to the minerals is a lot of times when we're seeking out psychedelics, we're really a lot of times looking for something different emotionally, right? A lot of times these experiences, they bring about, childhood traumas and different things that we've kind of unraveled. And what a lot of times that we're doing is we're cracking open this calcium shell that we've kind of getting into, bringing it back to the minerals. So most people, you're going to see more of a higher ratio of calcium to magnesium when that's supposed to be flipped. Mm-hmm. And as that calcium kind of builds up, it builds up in, spinals, it builds up in different tissues, arteries. I had a calcification in my brain. I actually went to a functional neurologist at one point and was getting like scans on my brain. I was like, thought I was going crazy. And they were like, oh, you just got a calcification right here. You can't do anything about it. I'm like, I don't believe that you can't do anything about that, but okay. I'll keep researching. But what it is that these calcium deposits are just, they build up when your minerals are imbalanced. And once you create that calcium shell, I think a lot of people would resonate with something like this is you feel like you have the emotions within you, like you want to be a better husband or a father, or you feel like there's something that you should have said or a situation you should have handled better, like on an emotional front. But your body doesn't allow it to happen because of the calcium shell. The energy's too low. You would rather just sweep it under the rug. Hopefully everything's better the next day. You don't want to have the tough, challenging, emotional conversations. And sometimes we will use those psychedelics to do that. A little microdose, a little bit of cannabis, kratom, anything that kind of gets that energy jolt to where you can have these kind of conversations with your partner or with a family member. But what's really happening on a deeper physiological level, in my opinion, is that we're just in a calcium shell. And that doesn't mean that you don't need more calcium. It's super important. It's one of the top 4 most important minerals that you can have in your body. But you need to get those ratios balanced so that magnesium goes higher in the tissues. The calcium comes down a little bit. It's where it's at in its optimal range. And you'll find that with that energy boost naturally from the minerals, from the enzyme sites working more perfectly, then you're just naturally a more emotionally open and available husband, father, whatever it may be, whatever you have going on. So what those psychedelics, breath work, anything like that, that's really kind of shattering you open, I think that it's bursting through that calcification. But the problem is you're not long-term balancing of the minerals. So then the body goes right back into that natural state. So potentially, I would imagine the psychedelic ceremonies are stressful. I would imagine you would lose things like magnesium and maybe some other minerals. I don't know how much we know for sure on that. But what I do know is that I think we're cracking open that calcification that's going on. But without actually remineralizing, we're going to have a tough time. The body's going to go right back into the state that it was before the ceremony. So you're going to actually, I think, have a more challenging time because you've just opened up yourself to a different realm, to a different way of being, to the person that you may potentially like to be. But then as soon as that kind of aura wears off 2-3 days later, sometimes a couple of weeks, you feel like you're on cloud 9. And that goes back down and you're just back into that calcium shell, right back into that adrenal fatigue. You're going to be even more depressed than before the ceremony, not only because you may have depleted minerals, but because now you can't act on the wisdom that you just gained from the medicine itself.
Yeah, 100%. And I've talked to Jason about this, and his, not even theory, because he's done some testing on this, is that most plant medicines, if not all of them, go after calcium. Like cannabis also goes after copper. There's like intricacies with them and different medicines, but they all go after calcium. And so you're dead on, right? With like regards to you go into the psychedelic experience, you're feeling like maybe like emotionally guarded or something like that. All of a sudden you're able to express sadness, anger, whatever it is, right? Because it dumps that calcium. But then afterwards, right, that calcium goes back up, right, as the calcification comes back in and things like that. And then from there, you just like you said, you can't take action on anything to actually integrate that experience. So it just becomes this experience that you're like, well, I guess I can't cry without mushrooms, or I guess I can't, insert thing here without insert medicine here, right? So, a lot of times that's also like, you come from a left brain point of view too. It's like, well, I can't do this thing typically. It works easy with that. I guess I must just need that. That must just be the way I am, right? And it reminds me of that Carl Jung quote that says, until you bring the unconscious into the conscious, it will control your life and you'll call it fate, right? And so, like, I think a lot of people are walking around with that type of mindset or mentality without even really knowing it. All they know is that there's something that's off. They don't really know what it is, but they found this one thing that can fix it. And so that one thing now becomes God, essentially, And so, being able to, give credence and also awareness to this idea of remineralizing the body, it leads to a lot of potential for people to actually see maybe why, if they're resonating with what we're talking about, why that's actually happening, And, one other thing that is related in a interesting fashion, and I can get into why, that I want to dive into specifically is Kambo, right? Like diving into Kambo, because I think we've only had maybe one or two people on the show in the last 130 episodes or so that have talked about Kambo. So, talk a little bit about what Kambo is and how you found it. And then we can dive into like combining it with the mineral status and things like that. But yeah, start there. I'd love to hear if you could explain that.
Yeah. So, how I got into it was just obviously having all the anxiety and depression and fatigue. I didn't know I had Lyme disease. I actually moved to Florida and was in a home that had mold as well. I didn't bring that up, but so I was living in a moldy situation. So that was even causing everything to be even worse than what it was before. And that's when I really started to go like the most insane. Actually, like there were moments in there where like I would drop and break stuff. Like my brain and my body like wasn't connecting. It wasn't talking to each other in the right manner. And I used to play sports and work out, and I was just like in this moldy house feeling absolutely insane. And I, as we all do, we're a little addicted to social media. So we try to follow other biohackers and stuff at least. So we may be at least learning while we're on the damn thing. So I follow my buddy Todd Shipman, and he like started posting all of these Kambo things about, anxiety, depression, detoxification, how the peptides work. And so I goes, let me just see if I can find a practitioner by me. And there actually wasn't one in Tampa, but there was a guy who was willing to drive over to me for a couple extra bucks from Orlando. So he came over, he hit me with the medicine. I was super wiped out. But then like after I felt, because I had so many chronic infections and heavy metals and things, typically the more toxic you are, the harder the Kambo experience will be for you, at least on the back end, because you've moved around so much. And so I was really wiped out. And, so then I tried it again. I kept having them come over. I started to feel a little bit better. I would have, less brain fog, a little bit more energy, really, really potent as an anti-inflammatory. And so I just kept doing it, and I got so fascinated by it. And so I went out to California. I was out in the mountains for a couple of weeks, got trained. And then I did another training that was specifically revolved around like how to deal with clients who have Lyme or autoimmune, because they may need less medicine, they may need binders, they may need liver support, things like that. But what Kambo really is, it's an Amazonian medicine, and it's from a frog from the Amazon, Philomedusa bicolor. And they take the secretion from the frog, they put it on a stick, then they, it dries out, they mail it to you. And then when you're working with a client, you have to make superficial burns in the skin so that you can basically get the secretion a little wet. And then you'll put the secretion on the gates, they're called, that you open up. And then that'll allow the medicine to get into the lymphatic system. And so the whole time we've been talking about these psychedelics, this is why I love Kambo, because if you have autoimmune or if you have some kind of like fatigue or anything like that, the psychedelics are going to be tough on the system. You're going to feel amazing in the moment, like we were speaking about, but then become more depleted. Kambo to me is different. It builds you up because of the way it works, because of the bioactive peptides. There's dozens of these bioactive peptides. They're still being researched. Western medicine's got I think 70 different patents on these peptides that are contained within the secretion, but they can't really get it to work. My opinion is that they work synergistically, that you basically have to have them all in the ceremony for them to actually work. Some of them kind of permeate the blood-brain barrier, which allow other ones to get into the brain. So I think that they all kind of work together. There's gastrointestinal peptides. There's some that work with the opiate receptors. So a lot of anti-inflammatories. So a lot of different peptides that work for you. And then you're also purging out what's in the purge. Can be mold, can be candida, can be yeast, can be, bacteria, fungus, parasites. So for me, it feels like getting out a lot of those toxins while giving the immune system, up-regulating effect from the peptides. Peptides are all the craze. Every biohacker is injecting 3 a day. You know what I mean? So peptides are big in the health space right now. Well, that's what Kambo is. It's peptides. So instead of shattering you through the psychedelic experience, and then you might even do 2 or 3 ceremonies if you go to the jungle, and just coming back super depleted, you hear about people coming back depleted from those who are optimized even just because the experience is so stressful. So if you're already depleted, I think Kambo is actually better at kind of rebuilding. What I notice is people kind of gradually get a little bit more energy as they work with the medicine more regularly. And then it's kind of more of that, that's why I like it, because over time, I'm giving someone more energy, more stamina, less inflammation, instead of depleting them with say a mushroom ceremony or an ayahuasca. So it's really cool. You see some good effects on hormonals, and then there's something to do with the energetics. I see a lot of powerful ceremonies with Kambo from it setting intention, just like anything else. And I don't know if that's from the elimination of the parasites, if it's the energy just from the medicine being from the Amazon and that being sacred. But, I have the Amazonian music going. We use Sananga, we use Hape, we use all the things. I even have my clients on a PEMF mat with Schumann resonance going. I give them some binders. I give them some liver support. So really kind of stacking the protocol as well with some of the stuff that we know about. But I think it can be great. There's new research coming out, really heavy. I guess I wouldn't say heavy because there's not a lot of funding behind it, but some of these Kambo practitioners and researchers are really looking at the peptides specifically for Lyme disease. And that's kind of how I got into it.
That is absolutely amazing, man. I've had great success with Kambo. I went through a 2-year period where I was doing it every month, just because I found that, obviously the experience itself, for anyone who doesn't know, it's not psychedelic whatsoever. You can definitely have I would say a psychedelic experience, but it's not psychedelic in the way that you would think it is. It's just a very hard experience. It's like how you can have a psychedelic experience running a marathon because it's so hard to push yourself that hard. Not that Kambo necessarily pushes you that hard, just an uncomfortable experience, you're basically vomiting and, things we were talking about, purging. But what I found is that you can also get a great high from Kambo too. That warm blooded type, feeling you get, on those certain ceremonies. Maybe you do a couple dots or a couple gates and, you'll end up maybe not purging fully. Maybe you're microdosing it, but you'll get that really nice warm body buzz. I like that a lot. But what I found was that, for 3 weeks after I would do Kambo, there would be no mental chatter, mindset optimization to a fucking T. And I actually haven't done it in the last year and a half, but I'm going to sit with it this weekend. I'm just getting a severe calling to it based on what I'm doing with the minerals. And, I've been hitting a lot of, when I've been going through the mineral thing with Jason, he had me get a sauna. So I got a steam sauna and then I got a red light because I didn't want to get the infrared because I was well, I don't know if these saunas are built in China, who knows, things like that. So for EMF, I went for the light instead. And now with the methylene blue, the castor oil packs, I'm dumping a lot because I'm using the sauna usually every day, red light every morning, methylene blue now from here on pretty much every day. So dumping a lot of stuff. Plus I'm on a lot of herbs from him too. Schisandra berry, golden thread, bacopa, morinda, takasumi for the mold remediation, things like that. And I've been feeling that would actually be a really positive thing in my life again, to do that. But you're right, man. It's unbelievable. It's one of the things that when people hear about it that don't know about this realm, they're like, why would you do that to yourself? well, I think I speak for both of us when I say we wouldn't do it to ourselves if it didn't do something, right? And it's challenging to articulate qualitative aspects, right? Like, because again, a lot of the research still hasn't been done yet, and the research is coming out is super promising. But for the science nerds, you're never going to be able to give them an experiential type diagnosis that's going to make them want to do it. But at the same time, like, for me, it's been super valuable. And I know for a lot of my friends that have had Lyme and have done Kambo, completely remediated it, and my friend Josie went down to the jungle and did, I think, 12 days in a row of like 12 dots, like heavy dosing.
Mm-hmm.
And that got her completely back to normal. And then my buddy Mark England, he went down, I think he was in Ecuador, and did the same thing, like 12 days, 12 dots type thing for an initiation. And that remediated some autoimmune disorder he was dealing with too. So it's very interesting stuff, man. There's a lot of very cool experiences coming out of that realm that really turned me onto it. And so much so that I ended up buying my own kit, training with someone who had been trained, very similar to, I think they went over to California as well, like Mount Shasta area for it. But I trained with one of them for a couple of months to really understand how to self-applicate. And then I was doing Kambo every full moon. That was like our men's group thing we were doing for a while. And now, like I said, I've been off of it for like a year and a half, and I'm excited to get back into it. So I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah, it's funny. I think there might be some synergy with the minerals because all the time, although they say that the peptides are like antifungal, antibacterial, antiparasitic, I never actually seen a parasite come out that I could. Sometimes they're microscopic, so maybe there was something coming out, but I've never seen like bigger parasites come out. But I just did my last ceremony, my self-application, maybe like a couple months ago. And that was after like 4 months of remineralization. I seen parasites come out for like the next 2 days. So
Wow.
That could have been just from the minerals, but I think what had actually happened there is maybe back to the parasites feeding on the metals, my body maybe not wanting to release them. But now that my body's got some more energy and it's gaining energy from balancing, maybe it was like, okay, now the Kambo come in, we can release them. You know what I'm saying? So there might be something to the fact that like if you're really wore down with Lyme and autoimmune and fatigue, that even the Kambo might not be tough enough to get rid of some of the parasitic infections and things like that, because the body's like, we need these here to feed on these metals, to do whatever that, parasites are always demonized. Heavy metals are even demonized, and they are a big problem, but people don't realize that they're actually serving a purpose. So like if you don't have zinc, let's say for instance, in your thyroid gland, then the body's going to use calcium or cadmium, which is obviously way more toxic. It's going to shut down hormonal function, at least optimization, but it's going to prop you up enough so that you stay alive. So if you don't have the minerals, the body's going to hold on to the metals. And that's why chelation really can be harmful for some people, because you're trying to strip out these metals that are actually in enzyme binding sites where the minerals should be. So really, I think that the mineralization is kind of the core crutch that everybody should be figuring out and trying to get to. And then we stack on the psychedelic experiences, the Kambo on top, really kind of just to be more optimized, to really get in. I love going into those psychedelic states. I'm probably never going to quit doing that, but I've actually taken a pause on my like big mushroom ceremonies and everything. I've only played with Kambo a little bit between microdosing and doing that, because I really wanted to get my body all the way back into this state of balance before I go back into any of those bigger ceremonies, because I didn't want it to deplete anything. So I think minerals are the basis. Getting the diet, obviously. The diet is a big part. The remineralization doesn't work if you're not eating McDonald's and stuff all the time. So the diet goes directly hand in hand with the mineralization, with the sleep. And then from there, you can kind of go into these psychedelic experiences and get more out of it and then be able to like take action on them when you're done.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought up that. I meant to touch on this before, that, parasites are actually a good thing, that they go after heavy metals, because, I think it's a common misconception to think about a lot of these aspects that can be annoyances like parasites, heavy metals, etc., as looking at them as objectively bad. But at the end of the day, like they're there to serve a purpose, right? And that's why, like, I 100% agree with what you said. As someone who had done parasite cleanses for 2 years before I got into this, but was never actually like remediating what symptoms I was feeling, skin things and whatnot. I never really knew. I'm like, what the hell, And then when I learned about that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, And then when I started seeing my HTMA test come back, like, oh, first dumping lead, now I'm dumping arsenic, and like a very, very, very small amount of cadmium, I think, as well, came up. But it's very interesting because, I've never once like seen, at least I don't think, parasites come out of me as of yet. And so that may be actually what's going on, and maybe at the end of the day, maybe I didn't have a lot of parasites, right? Maybe I had something else going on, who really knows, but yeah, it's interesting, because I've kind of been bummed a little bit. I'm like, I wish I could see some parasites coming out, it's just such a great thing to see. But at the same time, I'm like, all right, well, maybe they're not what's in me, or they're not ready to come out yet, and so excited to do Kambo this weekend and see if anything does come out. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and another note is, like I said, a lot of times parasites are microscopic. It's usually like when they get bigger, they've probably been, I don't know for sure, but they've probably been in there longer. They've had more time to you breed and all the things. I was just in this really low level state from all the years of partying. I had a lot of immune system issues just growing up, ear infections and ear surgeries and lots of antibiotics. So I was just starting off at a lower level and then partied a little too long. So for me, I think, my wife hasn't had as hard a time as me or anyone else that I've recommended the protocol. They've had a little bit easier time than I have because I think I just had more mercury and a little bit more parasites and things going on. And, it's just a reframe as well, as like tell people is you want to blame the parasites for every living thing. And it's like, you ask yourself for a moment, why do they feel comfortable in my body, right? They are just opportunistic creatures. They're just going to feed on a decaying body. So really, you should be asking yourself, what am I doing wrong that's allowing the parasites to feel comfortable and just live freely within my body? And what that is, it can be a lot of different things. It can be emotional. It can be, heavy metals. It can be a lot of different, there's people have like 20, 30 hidden infections in their body, which is a lot of times from these imbalances as well. You'll start to release things that don't even look like parasites. They look like biofilms and different things in the toilet. You're like, I don't even know if that's a parasite. That's just something weird that's not supposed to be in there. So it's really bizarre, but they're just a lot of opportunistic creatures. When your immune system shut down, they come in and then they can be beneficial, but they also are going to cause some issues. Obviously, they shouldn't be there, or at least they shouldn't be in the quantities. Sometimes I think a lot of times people don't realize like Candida is good. Candida overgrowth is bad. Yeast is going to be there, but then when it gets out of hand, that's when it becomes, a problem. So all this stuff just needs to be in balance. We don't need to demonize any of it. We're just trying to get back to homeostasis so everything has its checks and balances.
Definitely. One of the things I noticed too, that I just noticed actually the other day, Rachel and I, ate like right under a gram of mushrooms, nothing crazy. We hadn't done that in a while. And we were on Martha's Vineyard, which is a beautiful island off the coast of Boston. And so we ended up we had a great house in the middle of the woods. So we just laid in the yard, and I ended up noticing like, oh, wow, I used to have this little bit of fungus on my right big toe. Like it would just always, like if I rubbed it, it would feel like kind of like rough and rugged. I never got it diagnosed or anything like that. But I looked down the other day and I was like, holy shit, that's completely gone now, and a lot of like my bloating and things, because the only reason I got into mineralization was I had annoying bloating that wouldn't go away. And I was eating like as clean as possible. I mean, I've been eating clean forever. So, I was really like, what the hell is going on here? And I had done the food sensitivity test in the past. They kind of just seemed like a shot in the dark. Like, I don't know, this is a snapshot in time of what your body is currently sensitive to, but who knows what it's like tomorrow. So trying to build a diet around that was really hard. And then when I got into remineralization, I did notice that things got a little bit worse before they got better. But now, like, I have no bloating whatsoever. So a lot of like the first things that I went for are now getting remediated. But I think a lot of what's coming forth now are stored emotions. And that's where I think like a lot of shadow's been coming up, a lot of like that depression feeling. And I've welcomed it because I'm like, you know what? Like, I want to face these things. You got to feel them to heal them. And luckily, like, I've built a skill set over the last 10 years, as I'm sure you have too, of like, okay, I know how to feel my feelings, like I know how to cry, I know how to do these things now. So, that's helped a lot in remediating these things long term. And I'm really excited, man, to see where it keeps going, hearing your progress and like where you've been able to get to. I'm really, really excited, man. And, one of the things too that I think is a great thing to talk about during this episode, because some people may hear this and be like, well, shit, maybe I still want to sit with psychedelics in some way, shape, or form and benefit from them. But I'm also realizing that maybe I don't really want to have a lot of those big experiences right now, because maybe a lot of this episode is resonating. You mentioned microdosing LSD, which is something we haven't heard talked about in this show yet. Everyone knows microdosing about magic mushrooms, and with psilocybin, but you don't get a lot of people talking about microdosing LSD. So tell me a little bit about how you first found that worked. I mean, you told me about the big acid trip that you did that kind of showed you like, oh, wow, there's definite, power here. But, how'd you get into it and kind of what some of your results have been around it? What have you felt? Maybe what your protocol is, things like that as well.
Yeah, so that was another kind of Tim Ferriss thing. It really sparked my interest because at the time I was still having trouble. Like, I was kind of backing off the partying, but then I would still get sucked in on these 2, 3 day benders. And, because I was still living in around all my friends who partied, and it was fun. And, hearing that it was actually a part of the original Alcoholics Anonymous was a really big kind of eye opening thing to me. But then they left it out because they thought it was just kind of be, ruffle a little too many feathers. And I'm like, well, what the fuck? Was like, is there a substance that actually makes you feel like you don't really care about drinking alcohol? And so, I didn't know what I was doing. The same guy who I knew that gave me the first LSD. So I went and bought some tabs, and I was like, okay, you're supposed to do like 10 micrograms. One tab is 100 micrograms. So I'm just going to try to cut it into these little tiny pieces. Let me tell you, that's not the way to go. I want to get a caveat and go, that is not how you should do it, because when they put 100 micrograms on the paper, it doesn't dry evenly. So you can be taking more or less depending. So you take one day, and then you wait a couple days and you take another one. There was a moment where I was like buying my car, and this acid hit me so hard that I was in there like signing documents. Like, I didn't even read the shit. I was just like, I'll take the car. Like, I was like, dude, I'm kind of fucked up right now. So that's not the way to do it. What you want to do is make sure you know who you're getting it from, because sometimes they're a little bit stronger. You can get ones that are 200 micrograms. There's people that go to festivals like higher doses and things like that. So make sure you know what the dose is. And then you get a 10 milliliter bottle and you put the tab in there with the Everclear. So it's really easy to dose. And you want to take between, I'd say start with 5 micrograms and then maybe go up to like 15 if you're maybe a little bit larger. Some people can do like 20, but I find, around 10, 15 is really good if you're trying to be productive. Now, if I go out to a concert or something, I may even take a little bit more. And so that I'm not worried about drinking alcohol and I'm just having a good time and things like that. So sometimes you can go a little above that if you don't have any obligations, you know what I mean? So that's a little bit more of like a party dose or like a concert style dose, things like that. But what it did for me is it just banished a lot of my thoughts around alcohol. Like, just super simple. It's not even an everyday thing. It's like a 2, maybe 3 times a week. I was doing it in the beginning for a while, and then I've taken some breaks, and then I've, come back around to it. But it's just, I think it's like gets left out of the conversation because a lot of people come around to these psychedelics and things like, this is all natural. We can't, why is a plant illegal? Like all these sayings that we throw around. But the LSD, if you give me one option to microdose for the rest of my life, I'm taking LSD over mushrooms. Now, I like a more ceremonial dose as mushrooms over LSD. But when it comes down to microdosing, I'll take LSD all day. I feel like I'm more creative. I feel like I'm happier. I feel like I have more energy. I feel like I don't care if people around me are drinking, and I do drink every once in a while now because I've done all this work where it's like I can go. I went to the Odessa concert the other day and had like 4 drinks or whatever, like I can do that now that I've done a bunch of work and came around. But, a lot of times, in the beginning it was tougher. And so if I had something to lean on like LSD, it made it a lot easier. I would still be in a better mood. I could talk to everybody. And if I wanted to have 1 or 2 drinks on the LSD, I wasn't battling with myself, because you know how it is. If, coming off of any addiction, you start getting around people who are doing that, probably a lot of your listeners with the cannabis thing, they try to give it up, but then they go hang out with their buddies and everyone's smoking joint after joint. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. You're like having this battle with yourself. Like, I'm only going to have 2 puffs, or I'm only going to have 2 drinks, but you're not even enjoying the actual setting and situation of being social, because you're battling how much alcohol you're going to have all night or how much cannabis you're going to smoke all night. You're really not even in the actual setting. You're just in your head the whole time because you're trying to like slow down on something that you really used to enjoy, like overindulging in. So the LSD for me, like if I would take a little microdose, if I knew everyone was going to be drinking on the beach, or if I knew everyone was like at a concert, for me, it kind of banished that. Like I would just have like 1 or 2 drinks, or sometimes no drinks, because of the LSD, like made me feel like I didn't even care. And then over time, like the more you don't drink, the more you don't really care to drink, or then you just drink here and there. And so for me, it really helps. And I hope anybody listening who's battling with alcoholism, if you know a guy, I don't know where you're going to get it, but go figure it out. It ain't too hard to find. It's everywhere. It's cheap.
Yeah.
It's super cheap. Like you pay like $5-10 for a tab, and then that's like 10 microdoses. I mean, you're talking about 50 cents to like $1 per dose, like, I mean, it doesn't get much cheaper than that. Like we take all these like nootropics and different things that cost, $200 a month, like acids, like a couple times a week, $1, $2 a time, sometimes 50 cents if you buy it in bulk. I mean, relatively cheap. It'll have you more creative. It'll have you more productive. It'll have you, if you're dealing with like addictions, I think it really gets rid of a lot of things like that. So I really wish it was in the conversation more, because like every time I'm talking to these people, it's always like this mushroom or, everything's getting into. And I really wish LSD was in the conversation more, especially for alcoholism or any kind of addiction.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like cannabis and LSD are almost kind of like the redheaded stepchildren, in a way, of the psychedelic movement, when in reality, they both have so much value. And with LSD specifically, I'm very similar to you. Like I would rather microdose with LSD and do my deep journeys with psilocybin, not because LSD can't take you on a deep journey. It's just that there's so much energy that runs through you when you do like a heroic dose on LSD. And it can be
It's
like,
a lot.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It feels like you're plugged into God's electrical socket, for number one, right? And then also like, it's kind of like a little bit less user friendly, I guess I would say, right? Like mushrooms, you can lay down and they'll take you on a journey. And like, yes, they can be scary. Yes, they can show you some stuff that maybe you didn't think you were going to see, right? But they're going to guide you back home after. LSD is just kind of like, you're there, man. Go look at bark or something. Keep yourself occupied for the next 10 hours. Yeah, for the next 10 hours.
It's long too. That's the other problem.
Yeah, 100%, which is not practical for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
and also like with LSD, you get this little piece of paper. You really don't know what's on it, right? You take it and you kind of just fingers crossed, that it's only a single dose, not a mega dose. And at the same time, with psilocybin, you can see how much you're going to intake. Now, there can be different psilocybin content in each, strain you go with. So there can be minor differences, but it's not going to be like a world shattering type thing from one strain to the next, And so, yeah, I highly agree that I feel LSD needs a bigger spot in this conversation. And that's why I was so excited when I figured out you were microdosing LSD, because my experiences with it have been absolutely fantastic, very similar to yours. And I feel like it doesn't get talked about at all, and it's very interesting.
Especially for productivity. Like, if I do like, 0.1, 0.2 of mushrooms, I can still like be productive, but it's not the same as LSD. So I feel like it's just more able to integrate into like entrepreneurship and like things that you're doing. Like I'd rather take a 0.2 of mushrooms, like if I'm out kayaking, I'm like more chill. I'm more just like looking at trees, so it's like a little bit more like airy, kind of like you don't care, like you're less like involved. And LSD kind of gives me a little bit of boost. I'm like locked in, I'm zoned in, I can get a bunch of work done, but I'm not inebriated or like drunk or anything. You're pretty much normal, but you're like kind of operating on a higher level. That's why these Silicon Valley people and stuff are all hooked on it. And you see Steve Jobs, that's another person that never gets credit. We didn't really know that when all this Apple stuff was coming out, but then you read his book and he's talking about how LSD kind of sparked everything for him. So it's funny as we talk about like kind of not really demonizing the psychedelics, but like kind of, focusing more on the minerals. I still like to get into these altered states a little bit, because I feel like there's different thoughts and thought patterns that come about that don't come about even with remineralization or anything else. There's something that happens when you're in a little bit of an altered state. Creativity flows a little bit differently. Your thought process is a little bit different. So, I'm trying to get my body back into homeostasis with the minerals and then utilize the micro doses and the plant medicines even better. That's really my goal. So I want to like bring my body all the way back into balance, even if it takes 2-3 years, play around with microdoses here and there, and then start to utilize a lot of these medicines that we love in just like a more efficient way.
Definitely. I can tell you that one of the things that I did a couple of months into this protocol was an MDMA experience. I have a certain mineralization protocol I use for any MDMA experience. I don't do them very often, maybe once, twice a year, but I got this protocol from a doctor. And so with the mineralization protocol I was on, plus this, I came out of that experience literally not even feeling like it happened. It was one of those things where beautiful ceremony with 10 other people, and everyone woke up feeling pretty damn good, but tired, right? I felt like fully charged. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I've done MDMA enough to understand like what I typically feel like after, which I never mix it with anything else. I always, take care of myself when I'm on it, drink a lot of electrolytes, things like that. But this was like a whole new league that I entered, and that was really cool, And so the implications of mineralization, say that 3 times fast, the implications of mineralization can go deep for sure, and it's super interesting.
I'll chime in on that actually, because I obviously just mentioned that Odessa concert, and I've actually felt a lot different on the MDMA. I took some MDMA as well at Odessa. Why wouldn't you? You're at Odessa, kind of close. It's fucking amazing. I don't know why. I don't know why you wouldn't, but I mean, they're amazing without it. But I don't know why you wouldn't take a little bit.
Yeah.
So I took a little bit at that show, and that was the first time I've taken it, and for sure since the program. But like I'm like you, maybe once or twice a year if I'm at like a show like that where it really enhances the experience. Me and my wife kind of open up, we rub on each other. It's great. And so I felt different for one after I think I used to need more, because of the heavy metals or something that was going on that I would need a little bit more to kind of get to where I was going. I felt like I needed a little bit less for sure. And then I'm like you, I usually I'm wiped out the next day. And I even had 4 drinks. There's something to do with the remineralization. I don't know if your liver's just functioning better or what's happening, but the next day I just stayed on my mineral protocol, which has some B vitamins and different things already in it. So I didn't really need much else. I took the magnesium before bed and all the things, but electrolytes. And I was cranking out work. My wife's like, "You're working?" I was like, I was reading stuff, answering stuff. I'm like, yeah, I worked until 4 or 5 p.m. the next day. And I had even had a few drinks and everything. Yeah, I did the coffee enema and hit the sauna and everything for sure to kind of sweat it out. But I didn't, like you said, I didn't feel like when I used to take it where it was sometimes 2 days you didn't feel right. You're like, shit, I'm a little off even the second day. And, I took a little 5-HTP, but besides that, it was just 5-HTP and then my normal mineral protocol with some electrolytes. And I was pretty good. It was kind of insane.
Oh yeah, it's wild, man. It's really cool being able to talk about these things because hopefully the listeners are starting to have their ears perk up, right? Wait a minute, you're telling me that I can take less and get more? And yes, that is exactly what we are saying from our anecdotal experience anyway. And also from Jason, from the other people you've talked to, I'm seeing a lot of trends come forth that, again, correlation doesn't equal causation, but it's a very strong correlation. And so, Matt, where can people find you, man? Where can they keep up on your podcast? Everything you got going on, man. You got a lot of stuff. We'll link it all in the show notes, but where can people find you, my man? This has been so much fun.
Yeah. So the website is integrativethoughts.com. That's also the name of the podcast, Integrative Thoughts Podcast. I'm on Apple, Spotify, everywhere. I talk about psychedelics. I talk about emotional. I talk a lot about minerals, different biohacks, supplements, all the things that we kind of chatted about today. I have my wife on there and we talk about relationship stuff a little bit sometimes, just, all the things that make us human, so I kind of go through all of that. And on Instagram is where I'm most active. It's at Integrative Matt on there, just like it's pretty simple, Integrative Matt. And yeah, if you want to, hook up, I coach people a little bit now, just kind of mindset, different things, just diet, dietary, all the things that I've accumulated over the years, but I'm really super excited to next year be able to offer the actual mineral protocol myself. I have some amazing mentors that have been teaching me along the way. So I'm in good hands. So hopefully next year I'll even be able to offer a lot of this HTMA mineral protocol stuff that we're chatting about.
Oh, dude, I love that, man. Yeah, we were talking before we hit record too on how I'm really motivated to learn this stuff too, just because I find it so valuable working in the plant medicine space to make sure that we're on the right side of history, right? And then we're not just dosing people and, well, figure it out. Good luck with your shitty lifestyle, right? Actually starting to really understand what are the other components behind connecting with a plant medicine that can help the plant medicine work more efficiently and effectively and allow you to be able to have the bandwidth to actually integrate that experience thereafter so your entire life benefits. So I love that, man. And I got one last question for you, Matt. And that question is this, right? So let's say someone is really excited after listening to this episode to dive into the realm of psychedelics in their own life. What is the one piece of advice that you would suggest to them to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether or not these medicines are right for them at this point in their lives?
So what I did before I tried anything coming from a person who was just super, didn't care about psychedelics, didn't know anything about them, was just more so using street drugs. And, I only did MDMA just because I was already on other drugs and just wanted to party. What I did is I listened to a lot of podcasts and read books. There's, especially now, this was in 2017. Now there's just like flooded. There's podcasts like yours, mine, I mean, whatever. But what I think helps a lot of people who may be coming from like a background of like really like skeptical to a lot of this, I think Tim Ferriss is the most helpful, because he's just like a big business guy. He's not really spiritual at all. Like if you listen to some of these shamans and different things, you can get really put off, right? So I don't get put off by that, because I kind of like, I'm like 1 foot in each realm type of person. And I think you're kind of the same, but some people really are not, and they've never done an experience. They're kind of just coming from like typical office job or whatever, or mother or whatever they are. So Tim Ferriss to me is kind of like that bridge, because he's talking to CEOs and different things, but then he's like really just like analytical and how he breaks things down. And then what I would say is like, get a lot of information, see if it really resonates with you. Make sure you know like set and setting. If you're going to do a bigger dose, microdose, not really needed as much, but I gathered a lot of information. I was reading Tools of Titans. There was psychedelic parts in that. That's Tim Ferriss's older book. So it's really just, MAPS has a good podcast. There's just a lot of information now that you can listen to for maybe a month or two before you even think about grabbing anything from anyone. And then I would say probably start with a microdose, because then you can kind of get a feel of how things are going to shift a little bit, and then maybe go a little bit over a microdose one day. I wouldn't say like just go earth shattering balls to the wall right out of the gate. I would say get a lot of information, see if it resonates with you. Play with microdosing for a little while, so you're kind of in the realm a little bit. You get your hand, you're getting a little feel for it. And then if you want to seek out a bigger dose, make sure you're with somebody where the setting's good, where you feel safe. And, you can find these, a lot of times out of the country, but you might have someone local to you depending on where you kind of like, reside. But I kind of say ease into it. Information first, microdose second, big dose after.
Dude, I love that, man. Like I always say, you can always take more, but it's hard to subtract once you've already gone there, Guys, This has been so much fun. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in. We hope you loved this show. Definitely check Matt's links out in the show notes. He's absolutely amazing at what he does. And as you can tell, he's a wealth of information. If you liked the show, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review. Helps us get the podcast out to more people. Until next time, everybody, may the force be with you. Sending all you my love, and we'll talk soon. Peace.